I think that blockchain and crypto is one of those technologies that are kind of lifting the lid on this Pandora's box of everything that's been going on.
Welcome to All Access, where you go all access to new people, new information, new insight that you yourself can listen to, apply, and be entertained by. My goal is to make all the information in the blockchain, Web3, crypto space easily digestible, accessible, and applicable so that you yourself can operate in the space and understand why it affects you. This podcast relies purely on word of mouth, no sponsorships, no paid ads, so I'd really appreciate it if you could share it with a friend if you see any value in it. Thanks, and enjoy the show. Hey, my name is Tan May. This is All Access, whether it be new people, new technology, or just anything you want to know. You got all access to it right here. Today, we got the main person, the spotlight, Maika. How are we doing today?
Doing great. Glad to be here. How are you doing?
Awesome. I'm doing great. Well, tell the people, right, Maika, who are you, and what is Webacy?
It's a big question to start with.
All right.
My name is Maika. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Webacy. Myself personally, I'm born and raised in Japan, but also within the United States. I'm an engineer by training, also a circus acrobat by training. A lot of hobbies, but the main focus right now is Webacy, which is a company that I started in 2021, focused on making digital assets safer for everyone.
Awesome. Acrobat to security entrepreneur. That's a big jump.
Makes a lot of sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get it started, right? Let's go with the fundamental of what you're actually protecting, and that's a digital asset. Could you explain, what is a digital asset?
Digital assets have become this broad term, and I think it's broad for a really good reason, right? So we are in our world of the internet. A lot of us are pretty used to interacting with digital assets. So digital assets could be files that you own. It could be IP that you have. It could be music files that you've created and that are on your computer. And then now with blockchain and crypto, digital assets also extend to things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all of these other assets that have monetarily tangible value as well. So it's a very broad category, but becoming more and more important in our lives every single day.
So how does someone, at least from the financial standpoint, kind of manage their digital assets for their overall financial strategy?
This is another big question. I think in our traditional financial world, now pretty much all of our banking is online if you're within the United States, and other countries are different, of course. Even Japan is still primarily cash-based society in a lot of places, so I'm just talking about the US right now. We're pretty used to seeing numbers on a screen go up and down, right? Like you have a credit card, you pay that number off with a number from a different bank that you have your money in. So we're very used to having those kinds of digital assets, and we have to remember that those are owned and operated by the banks. So the banks at any time could choose to freeze your account, or things might move out of your account for no reason, right? And we have protection mechanisms in place for that, but in general, that's the bank system we trust, regulated by the government, something that we can rely on. And then with the whole crypto blockchain movement, now you own some of your own assets. That's one of the biggest difference between traditional finance and crypto and blockchain. And so that opens a whole new door of what ownership means, responsibility, ownership over digital assets, risk, and so on and so forth. We could really just talk for days about it, but those are some of the main things to look at.
So you kind of touched upon it, at least financially, right? A central bank owning your assets or your money. If something goes wrong, you got to call them. There's no one else to really hold it accountable. They say, hey, you're not getting the money back. You're not getting your money back. What, besides like financially, right? What are the most pressing challenges within the digital asset management kind of system?
Yeah, I mean, the situation of the bank saying you're not getting your money back is kind of the worst case scenario, right? Like, luckily, we are actually very lucky to be able to rely on the banks or credit cards to, if there's a fraudulent card in a credit card, you can call them and you pretty much can get that forgiven or, change bank statements. And they're very flexible with that. So we're very lucky to have a financial system that's so willing to work with consumers most of the time. But when it comes to some of the new ways that we're managing our digital assets, we have to start thinking about it, because this whole time, like in a perfect world, I think moving the ownership from centralized systems and banks to our own hands as individuals philosophically that feels great, right? We should own our own stuff. But at the end of the day, ownership also means huge differences in responsibility. Because if you own your own things and it gets stolen, you're the only person that is going to care about that. The bank doesn't have any responsibility to take care of you or any of the traditional systems that we have today. So if you choose to move into your self-ownership, self-banking, or within any kind of crypto that's non-custodial at all, then the responsibility shifts too. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference when it comes to digital asset management from traditional worlds of assets to our world now in crypto and digital asset world. So we can go down either rabbit hole, but those are some of the things we have to start looking at.
I mean, you kind of touched upon it a little bit, right? Ownership and understanding, like, hey, you'd want to own what is rightfully yours. And so, one thing that may not be there right now is truly culturally, we don't really see the value of ownership because we have these central operating like entities technically owning it, but we feel like we own it. How can consumers kind of better understand not only like the value of ownership or just in general digital assets, but also the vulnerabilities there too?
It's a learning curve. And it really, like, if it's kind of a thing that if you don't want to know the nuances of it, you don't have to, and you can live your life in society and in ignorance in a good way. Sometimes ignorance is bliss is a real thing, right? So the more you learn about the financial systems that we're a part of, the more it's like peeling an onion, and each layer is more of this like what is going on kind of situation. But we live in this society that takes good care of us for the most part, and we're not going to get into like politics of it. But um, I think that blockchain and crypto is one of those technologies that are kind of lifting the lid on this Pandora's box of everything that's been going on, right? And then there's two camps of it. There's countries that bank systems have failed them, in which they're seeing huge rates of inflation, or they're seeing that they can't rely on the central government to be able to fund them and support their actual systems. So those countries are actually turning to things like digital assets within the crypto space to be able to have financing, right? Because they don't have anyone else to provide that structure. And then you have countries like the United States where people are looking to crypto as sometimes gambling, sometimes an opportunity to make more money. But that's primarily the use case within countries where the bank system's totally not totally stable, but stable in a way where you can rely on it, and you don't have crazy inflation. So pros and cons, but there's a lot of differences.
Oh yeah, and again, you touched upon what I was going to ask you next in terms of cryptocurrencies and maybe NFTs, like you said, gambling, right? When NFTs were really really popular, at least back in 2021, when or digital art ones at least, when the Bored Apes came out and like the Pudgy Penguins, and people were like, "Why are you spending 50K on a random JPEG? Like what are you doing?" And you hear about the pump and dump scams with cryptocurrencies. You know, being in the security space, how does that kind of change, uh, you know, the concept and the way digital assets should be secured?
Yeah, this is a great question to touch upon because the technology is what it's like 20 years old now, maybe a little bit
Yeah.
older from the core, right? So it has had quite a bit of time to develop, but it's still so early, and it's a phrase that's kind of overutilized within the space. Like we're so early, but it's still pretty true. When it comes to being in the security space, that's great because there's always more to take care of. So
Mm-hmm.
security is definitely going to stay in business for the rest of time. But for us, we actually started the company because we got hacked individually, right? Founding team members got hacked,
Oh wow.
and it wasn't that much, but we're all pretty digitally and technologically advanced as consumers, and
Yeah.
so the fact that it was so easy to get hacked, it was so easy to fall victim to some of these common scams and rug pulls and things that are not just crypto specific. It's like a lot of them are just phishing links, right, or
Mm-hmm.
social engineering. So that's where the company started, and the Web3 ecosystem of safety is not just crypto or blockchain, it's all of the Web2 internet safety plus the new safety that we have to think
Mm-hmm.
about. So it becomes a lot more complicated, and the necessity for companies like Webacy and other places, other companies in the space just goes through the roof. So there's a lot of teams doing really good stuff in the space to improve it, but it's actually going to be probably necessary to build from the ground up in the products that consumers are using themselves rather than trying to attack one thing at a time.
Well, when it comes to actually knowing how to protect yourself, like you said, you guys are very technologically advanced, and y'all still got hacked. And many people who may not be as technologically advanced be like, "Hey, I don't want my stuff stolen." So, what are like the key skills or knowledge areas, like you mentioned, phishing attacks and social engineering, um, people should really start to develop, or at least start looking into, to kind of manage, forget digital assets, but their overall assets in general.
I think it's having a really good BS meter is one place to start, and
Okay.
that's a skill
Yeah.
you can develop.
Uh huh.
Like if something seems too good to be true, you need to know,
Hmm.
you need to take another look, right? And the
Like a
internet is
free
full of
$2,500
fake
gift
promises.
card or something like that.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
who in their right mind would just hand out free money, right? And
Yeah.
even if
I'm
you
not
want
giving
it to
it.
be true,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can give
Yeah.
it to me, I'll tell to take it, but
That
even
work.
if you want it to be true, like we can tell ourselves any kind of story, but a lot of these scams and fake things play on human emotion, right? So
Uh huh.
FOMO, fear of missing out, timing, right? Like saying you only have 24 hours to claim this prize, utilizing different news drops in the space saying, oh, if a big project says, hey, we're dropping a token, creating a spam, like a fake token to try to lure people in that who don't know any better, right? So just having that ability to take a step back before you click on anything, sign anything, agree to anything, download anything across the space, whether you're in crypto or like not, just on the internet in general. That's something
Hmm.
you need to flex that muscle to build it. But once you have it, then you stop falling prey to those kinds of things.
Okay. So one thing that a lot of people who are looking to get into space and might not be able to understand, forget the security aspect for a second, but managing their assets and using technology to automate it, you know, how can they leverage that?
So for people who are brand new to blockchain, there are a ton of different companies and resources for, first of all, education. I think that the more you feel comfortable with the actual concepts of it, the more you're going to be feeling comfortable to put a little bit of money
Hmm.
in. But there's also a lot of technological advances in the space, so it's not as complicated as it was a year ago. There aren't as many terms that you have to learn as before. And
Hmm.
that's really, we're going to see the continuation of that to allow for more adoption of the technology itself, which is great. But if you're totally brand new, typically people are actually going to come in through a centralized exchange, which is very similar to a bank, right? So you would open an account through your email password. It's all
Hmm.
things that you're very used to with any kind of account online. You can buy a little bit of crypto. I mean, you can buy crypto on Robinhood or some of the biggest like
Banking.
centralized
Yeah. Yeah.
exchanges.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where you want to start, learn a little bit, and then you can graduate to things like self custody and your own wallets and so on. And then the journey just kind of goes from there. You learn as you go.
Hmm. So you mentioned the BS meter, right? And BS meter, like I mentioned, like the $2,500 gift card coming in through randomly. Um, in this day and age, most of the time, if that gets you, I'm sorry, that's you need a higher BS meter. But in like the Web3 space, there's gonna be new sorts of payment, like, oh, I just got, let's say 10 Bitcoin, or like, I got this X amount of some certain coin, or I got this. And when it comes to NFT, so I got this NFT, right? You not might not be aware of the true value, that the perceived value, to really gauge a BS meter. Like how can people, and like you said, it's an early stage kind of thing where more and more more and more players and more things will be coming into the space. How can people start building that BS meter, at least for Web3 concepts?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that a lot of these coins, these tokens, these NFTs, it's hard to have a one-to-one comparison to a dollar value, so it feels a little
Mm-hmm.
bit like fake internet money.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
once you get more experience in the space, you'll start to understand. Um, I think one really good thing is, again, to utilize the educational resources that are in the space, right? So learning courses, which there's a ton of free stuff on. For example, Coinbase has a whole university catalog of things you can use. But then also, once you are in the space, leveraging the security tools that are out there, right? Like I'm here because I run a company, Webacy, and we have tools for consumers who are first either getting started or within the space and just want extra security to understand, what is the risk of the assets within my wallet? What is the risk of the activity I'm doing on chain? So we were thinking about new users and current users, all of the issues that they run into, and we're building tools for that. So companies like ours is other companies that do other things within the space in the security side of things. And so actually using the tools are something that I would recommend people to try out. And again, with that comes the caveat to use trusted tools.
Exactly.
You like look into the team before you download anything or add anything, and these are all just part of the story.
So when it comes to, like you said, do your own research, a lot of the time people, not necessarily they don't have time, but maybe there's a lack of interest to do research, which kind of turns people off towards,
Mm-hmm.
you know, understanding, hey, maybe I should care about this being secure, right? How, or I guess, what point do you think we would need to get to start seeing a culture shift? You're saying because you're heavily involved in this space, and like you said, we're early birds. Um, Maybe in a year quantity timeline or any sort of timeline you can give of when we can anticipate people to start seeking that culture shift of not only adopting Web3 technology, but start seeing the not the benefits of getting especially with the bull run right now. A bunch of Bitcoin people buying Lambos in Puerto Rico, like, oh shit, I want to be like that kind of guy. But um, how what point do you think we're going to start actually really implementing this technology and start caring about the caveats?
Human nature is a funny thing, right? Like I think
Yeah.
we're drawn to things that are allowing us to flex. We're drawn to money. We're drawn to
Uh-huh.
having that shiny new thing that everyone else has, and that's just
Oh yeah.
something we all know is true. Or no matter how like of a high horse you think you're on,
Mm-hmm.
we see it every day in the culture.
Oh
So
yeah.
well, I'm starting to see a bunch of great opportunities of different use cases of blockchain tech that touch the real world. So this company
Mm-hmm.
called Blackbird that I'm a huge fan of because I like to eat out at restaurants, and so what they do is they allow you to go to the restaurant, and once you dine in there, you can tap to earn like points, right? And whether or
Mm-hmm.
not those points become like dollar exchangeable is to be decided, but it's something that adds a new way for you to interact with the world around you. Things like this, I think, are going to draw a lot of new users into the space because it's tying something we're used to, like eating out at a restaurant, to something new, like the technology, and it
Mm-hmm.
abstracts away all of the complication. So I'm sure a subset of users that are onboarded through something like that might become more interested in crypto and end up becoming a user that touches the technology deeper. So I
Mm-hmm.
think there's going to be a lot of touch points like that. E-commerce is going to be a big one. Blockchain gaming is going to be another one. I'm not really a huge gamer myself, but that industry is what, like 3 trillion gamers around the world is a number I heard recently, which is a large
Ridiculous.
portion of the
Yeah.
population. So we're seeing it happen already. And as the price action goes up, like we see this every time, as Bitcoin ETH goes up, more people come into the space. They call it that bull bear cycle, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very real. It just happens.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to touch upon, with education, right? It's great to do your own research, but sometimes it's good to talk with your peers, right? Having a community. Um, you said you're from in the Bay Area, obviously technology there. There's likely to be a lot of projects happening in that area that you can probably bounce ideas off of with different entrepreneurs or different other people who may not necessarily be in the same position, well, geographically, you know, online wise, are there resources you use for either research to keep up to date with the space or learn more about, what is your education? What does your own education look like in the space?
Yeah, I consume a lot of external news just to keep up. Blockchain is one of those rapidly changing ecosystems where if you miss a couple of days, it feels like it's been a couple months.
Yeah, yeah.
So I go through regular like content cycles. So in terms of a podcast, I really like Bankless does a weekly roll up that talks about all of the latest news in the industry. So I listen to that one, I'm at the gym or something like that. Otherwise, I subscribe to a couple different newsletters that have really good both regulatory concepts around crypto to keep up with that, along with social and company news. Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, that's
Mm-hmm.
probably the main place where a lot of people hang out in crypto, as well as some of the other newer platforms for social, like Farcaster, which is kind of like a crypto specific version of a social network. And then the last thing would be Telegram. So there's Telegram's one of those messaging
Mm-hmm.
apps like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, but a lot of Web3 people utilize it, and so some of the groups in there you can just get all the news, all of the updates, all of the events, and crypto is very global, so they do a really good job of keeping people in the know and up to date.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess um, when it comes to, oh, sorry, just throwing in the
Sorry.
background. Threw me
Yeah.
off for a second. When you see the balance between innovation and digital assets and the need for security evolving, right? It's because myself, I'm in the cybersecurity space, and like not even just Web3 companies, but in general, everyone's getting hacked. Corporations, and with AI-driven technology happening, more and more threats are becoming worse and worse. How how do you see the balance between innovation, like I said, with digital assets and the need for security kind of evolving? How important will that actually play in the space?
I think it's absolutely critical. But as we've seen with any new technology, it's happening at the same time, right? Like
Hmm.
security practices slow down innovation, rightfully so, but we're going to see the innovators that are pushing things forward, speeding things up, then security
Yeah.
catches up, regulation catches up, and so on. And that's always how it's been. But you're in cybersecurity, so you know. And prior to starting this company, I was doing cybersecurity at Microsoft, and so
Awesome.
I know very well
Yeah,
the
yeah.
slowness of how security builds into systems. That's just kind of part of it. And unfortunately, some of the hackers and or like the black hat hackers in the space are so smart and
Hmm.
so innovative, especially like you mentioned with new AI tools coming out, that it's just one team against the other trying to
Literally.
maintain it. And so that's just going to continue forever because it is much faster to hack a protocol and make a bunch of money than build a protocol that is very valuable to the ecosystem and make a lot of money that way. So there's a financial aspect to being a bad actor in the space, unfortunately, but
Hmm.
that's why safety and security companies are needed. And that's why we still have like physical defense. That's why we still have cybersecurity defense. And that's just going to become more important as things go on.
Awesome. Yeah. So one final, you know, digital asset kind of question. What advice would you give to someone who's kind of just starting out to build their digital asset portfolio? I know you just mentioned, maybe a little bit of crypto, but anything else in general, right? Like what advice would you give to someone to start?
I'm on my own journey of building out my financial investments and digital asset investments
Hmm.
too. I just graduated in 2020, so it hasn't been too
Awesome.
many years out of college. Yeah, so um, it's really unfortunate because I feel like the youth, at least in the United States, don't get very well educated when it comes to personal finance or opportunities in it.
Hmm.
So first of all, I think whether you're in college or just starting your personal financial journey, trying to take some courses or talking to people older than you who you admire their portfolios or their thought process around investments and digital assets is something that I would recommend starting with. But for me, it's kind of I learned best by doing, and so it's a matter of giving myself a little bit of cash to try trading on uh, DeFi exchanges or trading on Robinhood or starting these things, and then the bulk of my digital asset investments have to do with very safe long-term strategies because I'm a little bit risk averse. As funny as that
Yeah.
sounds, as a founder and in crypto and as an acrobat. So take this with a grain of salt, but that's what I would recommend starting with.
Awesome. So, last question then, Micah, dead or alive, who are two people you'd want to have dinner with?
Mm, dead or alive?
Yeah, anyone.
Can it be one of each?
Either or. Up to
um,
you.
I guess this comes from a book I just read, but I think one would be Marcus Aurelius for sure, Roman emperor, philosopher.
Which
Feel
book
like
did you
he'd be
read?
very interesting. There's a book called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, which is like a
Oh, awesome.
philosophy book that's really well written. I recommend
Yeah.
that book if anyone's interested. I was into Stoicism for a while, so I was reading a lot about Stoic philosophers. He's one of them.
I
So
just
that'd be
finished
cool. And then,
Meditations.
oh yeah, what'd you think?
Oh, so good.
Yeah, I
I
want
mean,
to reread
it
that.
really makes you think.
Yeah. So number one would be Marcus Aurelius, and then the other one would probably be someone alive, maybe like Mark Andreessen. I listened to a
Okay.
podcast by him. I think it was with Tim Ferriss, and not to say that he's old, but he's like incredibly sharp and well connected, and like
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like he has incredible ideas, and he'd be a great dinner guest to talk to.
Kind of pick up how he thinks and what his brain is.
Yeah, he has just so much knowledge and experience. It must be fascinating to have him over.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's all the questions I got for you, Micah. Micah, anything you want to let the people know, or any final thoughts here?
Uh, Nothing much. I guess if you're entering your crypto journey, definitely set up Webacy. It's free to get started and it will keep you so much safer in the space. But other than that, just try new things, get outside, get some sleep.
Awesome. Well, this has been All Access with Micah and Tam May. Have a great day, everyone.